Hello, and welcome to the Buena Vista Project, a podcast about Mexican American history, politics, cultura, y más. Brought to you from Studio A at the Plaza de Armas building in San Antonio, the Mexican American capital of the United States. I'm your co-host, Elaine Ayala.
And I'm your co-host, Michael Quintanilla. With us today is Ramon Vasquez, Executive Director of the American Indians in Texas at the Spanish Colonial Missions, a nonprofit organization established in 1994 by the Tap-Pilam Coahuiltecan Nation, descendants of the Aboriginal people who populated South Texas and Northeast Mexico. Now, AIT was formed to preserve and protect the culture and traditions of the Native American tribes and other indigenous people who resided in the Spanish colonial missions. Also with us today is anthropologist Harry Shafer, a Texas A&M University professor, emeritus of anthropology, and the former curator of archaeology at the Woody Museum. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good to have you.
In October, cities around the nation will celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day on the 12th, the same day many Latin American countries celebrate Dia de la Raza, or the Day of Indigenous Resistance. What's being observed less is Columbus Day. That's due to the increased awareness of Christopher Columbus's role in colonizing the Americas and the atrocities that came with it, including genocide, slavery, and the widespread death of indigenous people.
What we want to do in this episode of the Buena Vista Project is mark the day with a look at San Antonio's indigenous past and present. We'll start with you, Harry. We know that indigenous people lived in what's now San Antonio and Bexar County for at least 13,000 years, what anthropologists and other scholars call prehistory. Where did they come from and what brought them here?
Well, the people of this continent is still a subject of research and debate. In terms of what we know for Bexar County, the earliest evidence that we have is about 13,000 years. This was an archaeological site where 1604 and I-10 are at the intersection there along Leon Creek. But there are sites throughout San Antonio that cover that entire span. There's a site in Breckenridge Park that dates around 10,300 years. The Apple White Reservoir work that our friend Dr. Austin Toms did goes back about 9,500 years and documents a sequence of presence going all the way up to the Spanish colonial contact. We've got I think Bexar County, about 2,500 to 3,000 archaeological sites recorded in the county.
That's amazing.
Yeah. You have to think the fact that the indigenous people use 100% of landscape. So anytime that you do anything anywhere that is not disturbed, you're likely to find some evidence of ancestral use, land use.
We're talking about almost 600 generations.
Yes.
Of people in this time span, and they left a legacy even though there's no written record of it, which is why scholars like you dig the ground of these, really some of them sacred sites. Tell us about what has been found. What does this research here tell us about them?
Well, what we have in this environment, because of the humidity, we don't have much organic preservation. So the story is primarily in stone tools and in reading the soils and what the soils also contain. And we're talking about botanical materials such as things like that. And what we have learned from that meager bit of evidence, we can compare that to regions where we have an incredible record, like the Lower Pecos, for example. These are different cultural groups for all intents and purposes, but what we see preserved in the Lower Pecos, we know was originally here. And what this really tells us is that the knowledge, we're gaining so much knowledge now about the indigenous societies and how this rich knowledge of the natural world around them, how they literally harvested landscape. Yes, they were. Yes, they hunted, but they also gathered. They also foraged, but that overlooks, I think, the most significant thing about the people. What we've learned in other regions like the Lower Pecos in northern Mexico, for example, that there was a very, very rich cultural tradition, and there was a counting system. There was they read the night sky. They read the
early astronomers.
Yes, they were. Well, that was half the world. That was half their world. The night sky was as important to them as the day as daylight. We know that they lived with nature's rhythms, and in that respect, they essentially knew changing seasons. They knew what was coming. They knew where the resources were. They could watch where the rains went. It would fall and go there some weeks later and harvest the resources. Very flexible. But when you think about it, for nearly 13,000 years, they lived off the landscape, using resources that we don't use.
Successfully.
Very successful.
And I know that this is a point of contention, but can we say that they were northerners that moved south all the way down the Americas?
Well,
I mean, I'm saying that.
no, there are two basic theories. One, that they came, maritime groups came over along the Aleutian chain into Alaska and eventually down into North America. And the record is not complete, but there's enough bits and pieces of it to suggest that there were probably multiple migrations. Some survived and some didn't.
And did they come north, south?
They came from the north, yes.
Okay. Yay.
Well,
We agree on that.
Right.
Okay. All right. Tell us about this beautiful image.
About 8 or 9 years ago, we had a gallery exhibit at the Whitty. It was called Gathering at the Waters. It was about the 13,000 years of Bexar County history and indigenous history. And we wanted to highlight the time when the native groups first met the Spanish around 1718 or something like that. I had a friend, an archaeologist friend, who was an incredible artist. His name was Frank A. Weir. He lives in Bastrop now, retired. He was an archaeologist with Texas Highway Department. And so we commissioned him to do 3 paintings. I brought Frank here. We drove him around Breckenridge Park. He took pictures of the landscape, and then we discussed what we were looking for. And with Frank's expertise and my comments and things about the native part of it, our colleague at the Whitty, Bruce Shackelford, helped us with the dress of the Hispanics to get it historically accurate.
Okay. Thank you.
And this is one of his 3 paintings?
Yes.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So, Ramon, there's also much to ask you about, but I guess we can begin with what you see as the major influences of Native Americans on San Antonio and Bexar County history, and where you see it the most vividly.
Well, I think the biggest thing that we look at in terms of the contributions is that the San Antonio wouldn't be San Antonio if it wasn't for the history of the American Indians. If it wasn't for the interaction with the Spanish, and one of my elders says that the narrative in San Antonio has been, prior to 1994, prior to the work that we started, had been that when the Spanish arrived in San Antonio, they were greeted by mariachis because the American Indian seemed to have been forgotten.
Yes.
And the idea of the Coahuitecan people, there was a theory that was put out in the 1920s called that the Coahuitecan were biologically and culturally extinct. So for that many years,
That was a state of Texas
that was a
theory.
that was a theory that was put out in academia. That's what they used to train their anthropologists, historians, archaeologists. That was the theory, and so you can imagine how many were produced, right? So the contribution would have been recognized a lot earlier of our people if we weren't have thought to be insignificant or extinct.
Yeah.
Because all the information that Dr. Shafer had just mentioned has been there for a long time. And we are now recently just uncovering. We don't know more than what we do know.
Mm-hmm.
There's still so much more to uncover in San Antonio's history, especially when it comes to the first inhabitants.
Is there evidence that there's even a longer span of time?
A few years ago, it was only 10,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
So since then, it's grown by 3,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
So give it a few, the more we begin to uncover, the more we begin to research and dig through the archives and all the early work that has been done, I think we'll start seeing that it may be even more. I think there's some evidence, some places out there that document some things around 15,000, some history around 15,000.
I've heard that number from some professors as well.
So I think, there's still a lot more to learn, and we're excited about it. Now, I also think that other contributions are, that we're still here. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, when you talk about American Indians in San Antonio, you can't talk about American Indians in terms of eras, because eras start and stop. When the American Indian story here in San Antonio begins 13,000 years ago, according to archaeological evidence, and exists right now. It's a continuum. Mm-hmm. So there's no way, no matter how hard people try to minimize the contributions of American Indians historically and contemporarily, it's still happening. You cannot stop that. We have American Indian descendants who are on city council right now, who represent us in city government, who are delivering babies in hospitals, who are teaching in universities, who are students in schools.
And who don't even know that they have Native American DNA.
Sure, well, yeah. And I think we guesstimate at American Indians in Texas, we use the number, we believe that there is about 100,000 right now living descendants of the families that came out of the missions of San Antonio alone.
Yes.
About 100,000.
This is why AIT is so important, to keep this story alive, to keep telling that story.
Yeah. I mean, we have to continue to. So, unfortunately, the American Indian history has always been an afterthought in San Antonio. We can, it's in some areas it continues to be an afterthought. In other cases, I think people are starting to see, hey, wait a minute, there's more to this. Dr. Shafer just talked about all the, the land use and all that. People didn't talk about that. 10, 15, 20 years ago, people weren't talking about that, right? So when you think about the sophistication of the people that was here, we're just now starting to uncover the levels of sophistication. The accounting, the numbering system is so, it's so sophisticated. The land use, they were not farmers, but they were cultivating the land. They were practicing population control in the 1600s, when we're still trying to figure out as a world today. They were already doing it. They know what overpopulation would do to an environment.
You mentioned this lack of knowledge, and definitely the lack of history taught in our Texas classrooms, from the Battle of the Alamo, where we kind of start our Texas history, and on. And I wonder what you can tell us about what AIT has done among yourselves and to the outside world to better understand the more complicated, more complex, more sophisticated history that
Sure.
AIT knows.
So internally, what we do is we make sure that all of our staff, all of our families, all of our children understand the contributions that we've made to this city and to the state. Not only there, but to the United States of America. Many of our families are eligible for Sons and Daughters of the American Revolution because of their participation in the first cattle drive of Texas.
Well, that's fascinating.
Okay, so we do that intentionally with our children. They have to understand our contributions, with the historical sites, right, that we visit annually. We make sure that they understand that. And then in terms of our employees, they go through the same thing. They understand our connection, with these specific sites.
And you're teaching language classes too, right?
Yeah, we've brought back the indigenous language of the lengua franca of the area, which is Pahalat, which is, has always been there again, but the idea, so our work as AIT has been what we call reversing extinction. Because remember, prior to this, we were
reversing extinction.
So all the work that we've been doing since 1994 has been about reversing extinction. Because we had to challenge. So we had to challenge some of these systems, right? Like, why would the Coahuiltecan people the only race of people that are not allowed to evolve in history? Everybody else's cultures gets to evolve in history. You can see it, but ours went extinct. The same as animals and flowers.
Yes. I remember so well your father, que en paz descanse, would say to me, his father would tell him it was better, in terms of safety, to be viewed as Mexican than Indian.
If you get beaten up as a Mexican, than to be killed as an Indian. Yeah.
It was better to be Mexican than Indian.
It was better to be beaten up as a Mexican than to be killed as an Indian. Yeah. Again, you have to understand Texas history. If you're not a scholar or somebody who understands Texas history, you have to understand Mexican nationalism.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in the old school that you're just referring to. When I was in school, Texas history began with the Alamo, basically.
Yeah.
There was no mention whatsoever of Native Americans. I was
Mexicans,
I've self-taught
Tejanos.
on all of that. I was self-taught on archaeology because archaeology wasn't mentioned. But when Ramon mentioned the fact that they what was taught was the Quintanilla and the Carancos, and they all were wiped out, But after I started working at the Witty and getting to know Ramon and getting to know the work that the Tapalhana have been doing and the incredible genealogical work through the generation from the Alamo, yes, that is a story that needs to be.
It's so impressive what they've done.
It's incredible. And we were all very moved by it. And I have a colleague that I had to basically sit down and re-educate. He and I have been colleagues for 40 years.
It's tough work.
Explain to him. And there are a couple of colleagues here in San Antonio that started working with Ramon and his team and have been completely transformed in terms of their attitudes and things.
And we have AIT to thank for that. Now, the other thing that we have to thank AIT for is so much of the work in the reburial, the sacred reburial of remains. Let's just take a moment before Michael takes us to another question.
Well, that was first it was an uncle. It was an uncle that said that about the Mexican.
Oh, okay. All right. It was an uncle, not your dad.
No, but,
okay. Not your father's father.
Yeah, but so the whole idea of reburials, was something that was unknown to us, to many American Indian communities. We were no different. But in '67, the Archdiocese allowed the state of Texas to dig up the cemetery at Mission San Juan. So when we started, like my elders, right, my father and uncles, Ray Hernandez and Mickey Killian and those, when they started inquiring about where these human remains were. Now you have to think these were Catholic cemeteries. They weren't Indian burial grounds somewhere out.
That's right.
These were Catholic.
These were the first Catholics of Texas.
Yeah, and so the church denied not knowing anything about it. And so what my uncles and my father had to do, they actually produced the contract from '67. They dug through all the archives and showed him that for $2,000, this was done. So at that point, we had to, we started working with the Archdiocese to get back these. That conversation started in 1980s, in the late 80s. And then by Archbishop Flores said, if there's an organization, if there's one group that can speak for the families, then we'll talk, would rather work with them. But if not, we'll work with all the families individually. And that's when they formed AIT. So our main mission was to get back the remains that were taken from Mission San Juan. So by 1999, we were successful with the church. They returned all the remains. 150 human remains were given back to the Tepilanquahuiteca Nation. They, in partnership with the Archdiocese, had the reburial. And we thought that was it. That was the extent of it. But come to, since then, there's been 3 more reburials. A 4th one in Valverde, thanks to the help of the museum and Dr. Shafer. But the ones at the missions, there's been 3 more reburials at the mission, at Mission San Juan. So many that the Catholic Church has had to deem that area a cemetery again, a repatriation cemetery. I personally had to travel to UC Davis to pick up 26 sets of human remains to bring them home because they were found in a closet.
Oh my God.
That
it's chilling.
It was labeled Mission San Juan, San Antonio, Texas. So the director at UTSA, I contacted them because the late Austin Toms contacted me and said, hey, there's this. So I contacted UTSA because they were the ones that were responsible for helping with the reinterments at the first ones in 1999. These were still associated to them, and they had to pay to fly me over there to bring them home. We brought them home, and then we found that there was another 11 at the Texas Archaeological Laboratory in Austin. So it just, and then
are they
there's still more out there. There's still more out there
in boxes,
in boxes and basements and storage, and we're still like that has become a major part of our identity. And nobody who thinks about reburying their grandmother.
Yeah.
Do you have a plan to rebury your grandma?
No.
It's actually changed the way we as a community look at things. My father chose not to be buried because of this and chose cremation instead. There are more of our elders who are choosing that route because they refuse to have or the thought of having their bones dug up in the future.
Yes, Harry.
Well, and cremation is not something that's new.
Yeah.
There's a certain percentage of ancient remains that were cremated. That was, there were a number of reasons why, I suppose. I mean, we'll never know exactly why, but there was a certain number that were cremated. So that's not something that's just a new thing.
Yeah.
It's just a shift in preference more than anything else.
Yeah. So it's the Catholic identity, right, coming out of the missions and that history of our people, and then interesting enough, like Harry said, it's like a shift back to maybe something that was a little bit more pre-contact.
I mean, some groups it was all cremation. It was total. That was a total way.
Ramon, I'd like to ask you on a more personal, intimate level, when you returned with those remains back to San Antonio, what was that like for you? What were you feeling?
I don't know, Michael. Numb, anger, because that was 2017. We thought we had put it to rest in 1999. You can imagine, and we had another reburial in 2013, right? So, but after that, we thought it was over. But I just couldn't believe that here we go again. We're having to do this all over again, and we're talking about these are people who. I could be holding your grandmother.
Yeah.
We have living descendants that were buried there, that descend from people that were buried there. And the other thing that a lot of people don't understand is there are records. Now, not all the records have survived, but in regards to the mission and the historic time period and the Spanish time period, but there is significant amount of records, for the 5 missions,
The
censuses.
Spanish were very good
Beautiful.
chroniclers.
Yes, they wrote everything down.
They did. Thankfully, they did.
Yes, they did.
A lot of those records are available. A lot of them are not. But I will say this in terms of indigenous cemeteries, they occur at every single one of the missions. It's not just 1 or 2. Every one of them have indigenous cemeteries.
And I was just going to say, and I asked the archdiocese, and I have a letter from the archdiocese from 2015. They in their letter, they tell me each one, all the missions have cemeteries. Not one of them has been desanctified.
Yeah.
So they're telling me that none of the cemeteries have been desanctified or moved, that they are all still there.
And this story gets repeated everywhere in the country where Native people worked, got married.
Thrived.
Yeah.
And so I think that when you tell your story, I think it's going to resonate with people that are listening in California near missions, people from other states where there are tribes that exist, where this land is considered sacred, and it wasn't always treated that way.
I also need, just to bring it home a little bit even closer. So the missionization process was the first process that set in motion boarding schools. So to kill the whole idea of creating gente de razón, creating people with a purpose, was to kill the Indian and save the man. Right through the missionization, which is the same foundation for the boarding schools that we are now uncovering thousands of children, their grave sites of thousands of children across Canada and the United States. They were the Spanish missions were the foundations for that.
Yeah.
How is AIT, how are you reflecting on the devastating history of Indigenous peoples and how they plan to celebrate Indigenous identity, traditions, and knowledge? We have Indigenous Peoples Day honors the resilience, right, of sovereignty of Native peoples of what is now the United States. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think what's exciting is the support that more and more cities and communities are getting from their local community, like understanding, because before it was like, you're going to do what? But again, we have educated more people today than we've ever had in the history of the world. We know so many untruths today. And they say, my father used to say that that history is judged by the morale of the times. And if we know all these other untruths, and we're not doing anything to change something, then how will we be judged? How will the future judge us? So when we see, more and more communities getting behind this, not just in San Antonio, but across the country, that, it's people are starting to at least understand, yes, that history was wrong. We cannot continue to perpetuate a falsehood, because then we become part of the problem, and we're not, acknowledging the first peoples of this continent, right? So, and the history and the contributions that they've made. You know how many contributions American Indians have made across this country to the first people who arrived here? I tell people, just the other day, I was doing a keynote for a conference here in San Antonio, and it was about community engagement. And I expressed, I said, do you know how long American Indians have been doing community engagement work? Do you think that when the 35
That was in that portrait that we just saw.
Yeah. When the 35 families arrived here in San Antonio, that picture of Frank Rear put up there, when those 35 families arrived in San Antonio, right? They had no food, except for what they brought with them. The only weapons was the weapons they brought with them. The only security that they had was the soldiers that they had with them. And you're talking about an area that was a couple of years earlier was visited. A rancheria was visited by 2,000. That had 2,000 Ayala Indians, roughly, more or less. The American Indians in every area that you could of this region that there was American Indians. Mm-hmm. We know that because archaeologists is telling us that, right? Okay. So do you really think that they sat here and they said, okay, Indians, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up camp right here. You guys, just chill out. We're gonna take care of all this. We'll be all right. Mm-hmm. Or do you think it was more like, man, you know what? They can kill us at any moment they want.
Yeah.
They can just kill us, get rid of us at any time that they want. They knew that they needed food. They needed help to survive. There was dialogue. There was people talking to elders. There was probably giving them gifts, like in some of the other Frank Weaver's pitch. There was probably some more humanness.
Yeah.
Happening than what most people would lead you to believe, that we were just hunters. If you read on the state of Texas online about Huahuitecan people right now, they just did this draft a couple of years ago, hunters and gatherers walking around aimlessly looking for food. I'm sorry.
More than that.
Yeah, that's
It's
okay,
more than
but
that.
we have to wrap it.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, you're right. The politicians are saying that, but what I'm saying was how wrong that was.
Yes, absolutely.
That was not what we understand.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Shafer and Ramon, and thanks to the Gomez Law Firm for sponsoring this podcast. You can watch episodes of the Buena Vista Project on our website, buenavistaproject.com, or streaming services such as YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music. We'll be back next week for another episode of the Buena Vista Project.
Until then, hasta la Buena Vista. But first, check this out. Mayor Gina Ortiz-Jones is shaking things up. Now, she's not here to be everyone's BFF. She's here to get things done for the people of San Antonio with the heart of a servant. But it also turns out the same woman who can shake up city policy can also shake her groove thing. That's just what she did with me. Yep, yours truly, when I popped into her office recently and joyfully asked, Mayor Jones, may I have this dance? Let's roll the video.
One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you. You keep saying you got something for me, something you can't love but confess. Shh. You've been a mess where you shouldn't have been a messin'. Now someone else is getting on your best. Gonna walk all over you. Yeah. You keep lying when you ought to be truthin'. You keep losing when you ought to not bet. You keep saying when you ought to be a changing. Yeah. What's right is right, but you ain't been right yet. You keep playing when you shouldn't be playing. You keep thinking that you'll never get burned. Just found me a brand new box of matches. Yeah. What he knows you ain't had time to learn. These boots are made for walking. That's just what they'll do. One of these days these boots are gonna walk all over you. Are you ready, Boots? Start walking.